Well, what can I really say? When I started out here, not exactly when I started out, but almost when I started out, I preached my first sermon in the Syria Mosque. The Syria Mosque held 4,000 people. And there I was on this stage, twice as wide as this, and I'd been out there so that I knew that unless one gesticulated enormously, you wouldn't even know that there was a person up there. And I started out, as I have started out every sermon since, with a simple word, friends. And I must say, at that time, it was really more of a question. But you've turned it into a wonderful reality. Far too generous, all of you, and far too generous those who have spoken. After all, let me put it slightly differently. Usually in Germany, where I've now been quite often, there are Laudata occasions, which means that everybody offers a speech, and the speech is in Latin. That's wonderful. Would have been better for me now. You wouldn't have understood it, and I wouldn't have understood it. And I would have felt a little more at ease. But I'm enormously grateful to you, and what you've really done is made possible whatever I may have achieved that would merit even something akin to this Pursuer of Peace award. Pursuer of Peace is a difficult phrase. The Pursuer of Peace comes from a verse in Psalms. Psalms are supposed to have been written by David. That's an odd person to have inspired pursuit of peace. Anything but that. But so it is, and it really is a challenge to us, since it was to the psalmist, or whoever wrote it, or whoever first spoke it. What can you do that pursues peace properly? Most of the time, it's just a dream, a distant, messianic dream. But you must move toward it. But can you move toward it peacefully? Can you pursue peace without being peaceful? Unfortunately, my answer to much of that is yes. It's the only way to do it. Because most people, whatever path you take, whatever the crisis is, whether it's something like Horizon Homes and Mainstay Services, or a group of rabbis trying to establish some new order, or anything else you can really think of, a new rabbinic school, I can assure you that none of those came about through pursuing peace. Good heavens, you had to fight every step of the way. When we tried to, or started to establish a rabbinic school in Germany, one of the leaders of Judaism came to me and said, look, the two of you, Walter Homolka and you, have a wonderful idea. It's never going to happen. That's a good way to be encouraged in your first 6 months of this. But my answer to him was very simple. I said, you don't know the two of us. When we have an idea that we think is really worthwhile and push it, it'll happen. And 4 years later, she came to me and said, well, you've got your school. It did happen. And that can happen with anything into which you put your whole heart and really do it. Certainly that happened with mainstay services. We lost twice to the zoning commission. We lost the next time to the city council. And we went back again, and we won. And that wasn't exactly peaceful either. But that's the way all of us should work. The goal, peace. Yes, of course, peace with an ideal. The path may be anything but peaceful, but that's fine. That's the way we should all work together, and that is the way you have worked together, because none of these things, whether they are those that were mentioned or anything else that wasn't mentioned, none of those would have been possible without you, without all of you saying, okay, Rabbi, or okay, Rabbi, you're really nuts to try this, but all right, we're accustomed to a crazy rabbi every once in a while, so we'll back you. And that works, and you have backed me, and you have backed many, many others who have helped me and who have worked very hard. For that, I will always be grateful, of course, and thank all of you for what you've done. But let me say a couple of words, not about the ideal and not about what we might have done together, but about the people with whom I've worked. Because without them, worked closely, none of this would have been possible. One of the things that makes a rabbi happiest is to have a successor who is so wonderful that all you can do is smile when he does something and moves ahead. And that certainly is true of Rabbi Bisno. We've worked together, and from the very beginning. We met at first at tea, and he was very generous. He said, you've been here a very long time, and I'm going to be your successor, and I look forward to that. What is it that you still want to do? I don't want to step on anything that you're interested in doing. My answer was very simple. What do I still want to do? Nothing. And I've really, I think, lived up to that. So I'm grateful to him for all that he has done and all that he has achieved and will continue to achieve. And I know that there are going to be many, many wonderful years ahead for him and ahead for you as his congregants. But he doesn't work alone. Rabbi Henry, who has been here many, many years now as well, has been a marvelous leader in her own way. Not perhaps always touching your generation, but certainly touching the next generation and the generation after that. And that is wonderful, and that's where much of the future lies. She has good ideas, and she has a wonderful way about her, whether it's counseling or whether it's dealing with individuals. And so I'm most grateful that she is here as one of my colleagues and as an honored colleague with whom it is a pleasure not to work, because I'm not going to do anything, but just to applaud what she's doing and what she continues to accomplish. And you know, we're lucky that we have a team of individuals who leads services. Molly May, who is our cantorial soloist, and all of you have enjoyed her services, certainly reminds us of music in the past, and so we are very grateful what she does in leading a wonderful new choir, just like Stanley Levin did a long time ago, and others have done before that and after that. And so we are very happy I am happy to be able to be here and to have such wonderful individuals who are willing and able to carry on in an original and magnificent way. And there are others too. I wrote down some names that I should probably mention. But I think that in most instances, I'm not going to mention them because there are too many, and you don't want a long list. But I will mention one, Don McGahan, who is our accompanist all the time at music. Listen to what he plays. It's not just the melody. It's all the things that he does with even the simplest melody that make that melody exciting. So there are many people who are offering us a great deal, and we ought to be thankful. But on a more personal note, let me deal with some individuals to whom I personally must be thankful. Not only colleagues, of course, who I'm not going to single out. As I see you there, I say to myself, I really ought to say something about him or her. I'm not going to go to that road and into that temptation. But let me look at my own past. My parents, of course, for the normal things that you look for in parents. But each one of them, also in a special way, was responsible for me and for my future. For example, my mother. She was a school teacher, enjoyed teaching school, no longer taught school after she was married. And when November 9th came, and the synagogue in Augsburg was burned, and my father was taken to concentration camp, as were all other males in the congregation. She, of course, as all the mothers and wives, were hard hit. What did she do the next day? The next day, she took my brother and me, deposited us with a rather elderly, actually, a president of the congregation and his wife, and went to the city of Stuttgart, a couple of hours train ride away, to stand in line for a day and a half to get a number which might sometime in the future entitle you to an entry visa into this country. It was crucial that she dropped everything, thought it through, did that. That meant that we were able to get out. Many were not. Nobody would have expected that of her, but she did it, and did it beautifully on her own. My father, who served the congregation like this, not quite as large, but a building certainly equal to this building, and then went to a small congregation in the Ozarks, in Springfield, Missouri. Often when I talk about the Ozarks and I try to explain the Ozarks to them, I say, well, you know, till I went to high school, I didn't have to put on shoes. Well, it's not quite that bad, but certainly it is close sometimes. Well, there he reinvented himself. He had a PhD in Assyriology. which meant that he was qualified to teach history, particularly ancient history. But in that small college, they didn't care whether you taught ancient history or modern history. So he taught all the history courses, reinvented himself suddenly as a college professor, but took the rabbinate, continued to take the rabbinate very, very seriously. Here he was, a rabbi of a small congregation, 150 families, maybe at the most. The number of people who showed up for Shabbat Eve services Friday night was limited, and the capacity of them to understand anything a little more difficult was also limited. He could have said to himself, well, I don't really have to prepare myself all that well. I can wing it. He didn't wing it. He prepared a serious sermon every Shabbat and delivered it, irrespective of who was there, and took the rabbinate as a teaching tool and as a teaching profession really seriously. And that was an inspiration to me, just as my mother was, as was my younger brother. We were in the same room, slept and worked together in the same room till I was through with college, actually. And he was finished with high school. And the good thing was he was my brother. The bad thing was his real field was debate. And he was a great debater. And so he taught me, just by all those years together, you've got to be certain of your facts, and you've got to know them, and you've got to state them accurately and do it. So he too was an inspiration to me in a very different way, as were, of course, my children, all of them in their own way, simply showing love of Pupsi. The boys, of course, well, boys will be boys, whether they're rabbis' children or not. So you learn about a totally different generation and learn to look at it in a totally different way. So one really learns with every human experience. And from Irene, whom I met after she had lived in Israel for 10 years and had a totally different life from our American life, I learned to appreciate things about Israel that I know nothing about. Not only her living in Israel, but before that, she worked for the Israeli government in being in Great Britain, the provisional government. She knew everybody. Not that she was anybody up on high, but she had met everybody, seen how they worked, what they were really like as people. And so a different kind of understanding of Zionism and Zionist leadership and Israel coming into being. So all of that, along with her love and, of course, our mutual interest in plants and gardens, you know, that's always difficult to find a picture of me. Should it be a picture looking at a book, or should it be a picture leaning on a shovel? And I really prefer the shovel. But I know that the book is equally essential and is equally part of me. And that has, of course, influenced my life, the inner life of the family, and also the inner life as one sees slightly beyond the circle of family. New individuals that come into your life that become important here in this city, or if you're lucky enough to find somebody in another city who is also helpful to you, like a young woman named Esther, with whom I've kept some company now. That is important as well. that you continue your life and continue it in a positive way in every aspect of life. That is important for me, and I know it's important for every one of you. You are pursuers of peace, yes. A peaceful life is fine if it's a creative life. If it's just a peaceful life, forget it. But if you are creative and doing something, that makes it a really important life. And I know that all of you, in your own way, are leading such a life for yourself and for this, our community. And for that, I will always be grateful. And of course, will always be grateful with words that I spoke at Irene's funeral. But for some accident, perhaps, or blessing of God, she years ago, and I years ago, would have been just a puff of smoke in the cloudy skies of Poland. So we are lucky. We have always been lucky in our family in this way. And I am, of course, as grateful as I am to you, grateful to God. Thank you.
I'd like to invite up all of my rabbinic colleagues, cantors, members of the clergy, Pittsburgh, out of town, out of the country, all of you, all of us together. Dr. Jacob, Rabbi Bisnow. Immediately following our final amen, we're all invited to proceed into Freehof Hall for dessert. Well, don't leave me standing here by myself. Come on. The mitzvah to pursue peace is unique among mitzvot. Rabbi Hizkiah taught, "Great is Shalom because about all of the mitzvot in the Torah it is written, if you happen upon, or if it should occur, or if you see," which implies that if the opportunity to do the mitzvah comes upon you, then you must do it, and if not, you are not bound to do it. But in the case of peace, it is written, "Bakei shalom v'radfehu," seek peace and pursue it. Seek it in the place where you are and pursue after it in another place. What is the teaching here? That with all of our other ethical obligations, we must act when the opportunity presents itself, when a particular situation arises. But in the case of peace, we must be proactive. We have an obligation to do the work of peacemaking, not only in the place where we happen to be, but also in other places, to seek and to pursue, to chase down peace in places where voices of peace and conciliation are not yet heard. To be pursuers of peace, we must be fearless. Our quiet teacher, our modest and sweet and wise rabbi, our pursuer of peace, Walter Jacob, is fearless. Please rise for our final benediction. Dear God, teach us to be fearless as well. Give us the strength of body and character to move beyond adversity and pain so that we too may work to make the world a more just and peaceful place. Teach us, as you have taught him, not to take ourselves too seriously, but to take our work very seriously, to do what needs to be done, to do what no one else sees or is willing to see, to answer Hineni, I'm here, and I'll do it, the way he has, time and time and time again. Remind us the way he reminds us daily, to use our wisdom to bring understanding and wisdom and goodness and gentleness to places that are not yet open and not yet good. Oseh Shalom, maker of peace, inspire us as you have inspired Rabbi Walter Jacob to keep growing, to keep sowing and tending, to keep learning, to keep pursuing and seeking, and to continue making peace. Amen.